Hello, everyone. Pleasant afternoon to all of you. My name is Vikrant, and I would like to welcome you to our webinar on transforming the customer experience using design thinking. We're really happy to see so many of you logged in, and I can, see so many people logging in even more. So we've reached a number of around 80 people, and it keeps on increasing, as I say. And a little bit about the webinar. That today we're doing an interactive session. It's a discussion-based session where our distinguished speakers will be sharing their thinking. They'll be sharing examples and ideas on how to use design thinking to create moments that matter for customer experience. I would like to encourage the participants to keep sharing their opinions and whatever questions they may have, please keep putting it up on the chat box, and we'll try our best to answer all of your doubts. Now allow me to introduce the speakers for this session. First speaker today is Mr. George Aveling. George is the group CEO and international partner of TAC-TMI in Malaysia. He's a mentor, he's an organizational leader, and a renowned author. George is a highly experienced consultant. He's a facilitator and has this amazing ability to bring concepts to simplicity and accessibility for clients. George and the TMI team, they have been working on major branding and customer experience projects with companies in Malaysia. We welcome you, George.
Thank you, Vikrant. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Good morning for those is it morning for those in India? Was it this afternoon? Yeah, good afternoon.
Thanks, George. Next, our second speaker for the day is Mr. Sumit Sahni. Sumit is the CEO and partner of InspireOne. He's an expert facilitator. Sumit has trained close to 6,000 people in workshops, and all of these workshops have been conducted in India, US, Sri Lanka, South Africa, Singapore, Manila, the list goes on. Sumit was also a part of Harvard Business Publishing's leadership team and guided the organization strategy in Asia Pacific. We welcome you, Sumit.
Great. Thank you so much, Vikrant, and good afternoon, everyone. It is so nice to meet all of you, and welcome also to my partner for this session, which is George. George, thank you so much for taking our time to attend this session and share your valuable insights with us. It's a good morning today in New Delhi. I'm sure it's also there in the rest of the world. We have 100 people, more than 100 people who are attending this session today. So thank you so much for taking out time. The way we'll be running this session today, team, is that it's more of a conversation style between George and me. We'll be asking each other a few questions related to this particular topic today. We'll encourage you to ask us questions also as we carry along. To do that, you can use either the chat screen or there's a question screen. You can raise it over there, and at the right time we'll be happy to answer any questions that the group also has. To start with, George, let me ask a question to you, and that is really around there's a lot of talk that is going on around design thinking. Can you explain to the group what is really design thinking all about?
Okay, thanks, Sumit. Okay, so if I was going to ask the people who are attending this webinar, if I was going to say to you, I want you to design a bridge. It's going from point A to point B. And what factors would be important to you in the design of that bridge? And so some of you will say, well, I'm an engineer, so I'm going to make sure that this bridge is structurally sound. It's going to last for 150 years. And then the other engineers would say, I want to make this is going to be a safe bridge. Safety is my #1 concern. And then there might be an architect. This bridge is going to be an absolute work of art. People are going to flock around the world to see this. This is going to be the pride of our nation. And so therefore the bridge is being designed through the eyes of the designer. So that when I run workshops, and typically I get the answer of it's got to be structurally sound and it's got to be safe. But then I say, what happens if we were to look at it through the eyes of human beings, the users of the bridge? I said, okay, so there's the most obvious use. It is people are going to be there's going to be traffic across the bridge. Okay, so it has to satisfy those needs. And what about people who are wanting to ride their bikes across the bridge? What about for exercise? Okay, that would have an impact. What about people who wanted to walk across the bridge for exercise? What if there were people who wanted to look at certain vantage points across the bridge? What if the city wanted to make a little bit of money and wanted to have telescopes to see these beautiful parts of the city? And so therefore we change our view of design when we look through the eyes of the user. So we're talking about human-centric design. It is not looking through our eyes, it is looking through the eyes of the user. And I was watching a video yesterday, and I love this term. It's about giving us mental elasticity to go beyond what we think into the world of our user. And if you take it to the next slide, so we're talking about human-centric design, which is a philosophy, but then it becomes, so how do we operationalize this? How do we do this? And this is the Stanford model, and it's around 5 phases: feel, frame, dream, build, and test. Now let me explain this process by using an example. There was someone who I know very well, hotel manager, and this person said, "Oh look, we've got a sort of a top of the hotel. There's a deck. You know, I want to create some new ideas. So we want to create a better experience. So how do I brainstorm with my team?" And I said, well, if you brainstorm, it's going to be through your eyes only. I said, why don't you go up there and talk to people who go to the bar? And there are different types. There might be couples, there might be individuals, there might be groups. Talk to those. Understand what sort of experience do they want to have. You might talk to the employees who work there. In other words, there's a bit of terminology. It is talk to the experts. Now, what are we trying to understand? Feel is understanding the world of our customer at a rational level. What do they want? They want to drink, but at an emotional level. Now, the Gen Y, you might have Gen Ys, and they might say, look, I don't want to have to go to the bar. I just want to be able to order this off the desk, off my table. Others might say, oh, look, I just want to, I want to have a great meal, etc., etc. So the first part is feel, understand at an emotional level your users. And I'm going to give further examples a bit later on. And we'll talk about personas. And then what we do is frame. What is the core issue? What's the problem to be solved? How do we satisfy this customer's needs? And a critical part of design thinking is getting the problem right. So, for example, if it was with the Gen Ys, hypothetically speaking, you know, the problem is they want to just have a private space and they want to be able to order it quickly. They would just want to be on their mobile phones. You know what Gen Ys are like. That they want to go to the bar and talk to their computer. Joke only if there are any Gen Ys in the room. So frame. Then it becomes dream. This becomes based on what we know the customer wants. Based on what we understand the real issue is, then we engage in the brainstorming. It is not brainstorming based on the engineer's point of view for the bridge, not the architect's point of view. It is the customer's point of view. A critical part of design thinking is you prototype. You draw it out, you build a model, and so therefore you start off by building it and people give feedback on it. And then what you eventually do is you pilot test it. So for this bar, they would actually try out an experience rather than go from ideation through to we'll build it. They test it out, and then they get feedback from their patrons of the different types. How was the experience for you? and then they modify the process. So it's human-centric design. Start with the customer. Understand what are we trying to achieve in the customer's world. Ideate around the customer's needs. Build a prototype and pilot it. Don't assume that your first version is going to be correct, and then you test it and get feedback. So that's the world of design thinking. Can I just add one other point? Right, we talk about.
George, I think.
Yeah, we talk about design thinking. There's a prerequisite for design thinking to be successful, and people are trained in the technique, but there must be a supporting environment within the organisation which enables design thinking to succeed. If you're a risk-averse organisation and you're not prepared to experiment, allow your people to experiment, and make little mistakes, you won't succeed in a world of design thinking. Therefore, we talk about agile, which is another big word. It's be prepared to make decisions, move forward, make a few mistakes, and then perfect it with feedback, and then keep going. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, George.
So Sumit, what I like about this process is I've got a teleprompter. All right. So I love this. So some people might say design thinking is a buzzword, but so therefore we might take the view that it's not a buzzword. So why is it important in the design of the customer experience?
Absolutely. No, I think it's a fair question. In fact, I did see a question on the question board also, where, one of the question raised was that, is it really a buzzword, or is it an old wine in the new bottle? In effect, it not really is. I think there are several reasons why design thinking has become more and more important over the last few years, and specifically because of the pandemic, now it's becoming even more important. I think to answer this particular question, if we look at, first of all, the practice of customer experience. The practice of customer experience quite rapidly across all several years through this change. The impact that digital technology on the way customers interact with the brand. The other one is around changing customer experiences and profile. So more and more customers are now becoming more and more digitally savvy. They want a better quality of service from almost all the brands that they deal with. And then also there is a very rapidly evolving competitive situation. Now the issue is that because of these key drivers of change, the customer experience as a practice is moving from certain traditional elements to some of the new elements. Now what are they? Several of them. One is that these drivers are pushing companies to stop focusing on touch points, but focus more on the journeys. What do we really mean by that? Earlier, we would have all heard this concept of moment of truth, and a lot of attention was given to giving specific attention to a moment of truth, delighting the customer over there. But now it's not really about that one moment of truth. It's about various moments of truth, and in the entire journey that the customer goes through. The other is that earlier, service professionals or customer experience professionals used to think about process improvement initiatives. And therefore, they could apply sometimes philosophies like Lean, Six Sigma to be able to do that, which were improving the processes, fairly well, but largely incrementally. But now, organizations are getting forced to really reimagine the customer experience journey holistically. It's about really questioning, and I think this goes back, George, to the point that you made earlier around the agile mindset. It's about questioning, why do we even work like this? And we have to reimagine what the customer experience journey would be. So whether I'm a life insurance company, or whether I'm a bank, or whether I'm in telecom, or whether I'm in real estate, really it's about how can I recreate the customer experience journey completely. Now this obviously needs that there's a good deep understanding of what the customers really require, I think, which is what the feel part that you were alluding to. But then again, I think the main issue here, team, is that in the world of customer experience, what is happening is that companies are realizing that now in customer experience space, we don't compete with our direct competitors. On products we do, but not on customer experience. In customer experience, we compete with any other brand which services my customer. And the reason for that is because that brand sets a benchmark, right? So, for example, some of us would be so used to the experience that, let's say, a Netflix provides or an Amazon provides, that it starts setting expectations. So, a lot of customer everyone, providing, experience to your customers, and that is a very different frame of looking at, customer experience software. The other important element is obviously this long march that organizations are going to make people realize that customer experience is not a part of a particular function, but it's really an organization priority. Now, the implication of all of this is that organizations have to really focus on redesigning the customer journeys. And in our experience, that's really centered around asking yourself 5 key questions as a company. Question number 1 is, what is really the targeted customer experience really we want to deliver? What is our brand? What is a service brand? To give an example, I think one company which is really, really powerful in digitalizing customer experiences and design thinking is really DBS Bank. And if you go to the DBS Bank website and you look at what does the brand stand for, it stands for Live More and Bank Less. And that is the aspiration, which is how do we create more and more experiences where people can spend less time in banking but still get banking done. The second question obviously is that in order to deliver this brand, do we really truly understand what customers require? And this requires us to go and spend physical, virtual, whatever time with the customer, and George will cover some of that as we go through it. Now, with the power of this 2 information or these 2 inputs, then I have to think about how do I apply design thinking to recreate a journey. And it almost has to be a fresh whiteboard exercise. It can't be, this is the way we do right now, and here are the fault, here we can fail safe. That's the traditional approach. Fail safing is a traditional approach. And while doing that, how can we leverage digital technologies? Which technology can we apply? Where can we apply cloud, blockchain, big data? And then obviously the last question is really to leverage data to see how we're doing so that we can continue to go through this particular journey. So I think there is a very strong business case about why design thinking is required, but not as a tool, as a philosophy, as an organizational philosophy, as an organizational culture, and not just as a process, or a tool that some people get trained on. So George, going back to you now, can you give us some examples of how organizations, have been using design thinking for customer experience?
Yeah, I've got a number, but let me home in on one where, for an airline, we were given the brief of helping the airline to redesign the first class and business class customer experience. We actually went to economy as well. So if we look at feel, frame, build, dream, build. So the first thing was, we did research, and through the research we identified a number of different customer types, and we developed them into personas, and we'll talk about personas a bit later on. But this is like an identikit picture. It's like a fictional character, but it represents a particular group. So for example, when we did research, we found that the first class, there were a couple of different personas. There was one type that was, first of all, the CEOs, this is a CEO type, when they went into first class, it was their decompression chamber. Don't bother me, do not bother me, do not come all over me. But when they looked up, they wanted someone to be there. There was another type of persona, and they wanted to know the process. They wanted to be kept informed. And there was one version of business class passenger, and they would like everyone to know they've got, on business class, they're the ostentatious type of business class passenger. And so therefore, we came to understand them, and what we had a hypothesis of what service meant for their needs. Okay, great. The next stage was to understand them at a deep level. So what we did was we took short haul and long haul flights. I flew with a passenger. The passenger knew what I was there for. I flew starting from the business class lounge in Kuala Lumpur I flew to Sydney, and he knew that there were certain checkpoints that I'd be talking to him, and then with another passenger on the way back to Kuala Lumpur. We had Shanghai, we had London, we had Denpasar. And from that, what did we do? We talked to people, we took photos, we talked to the cabin crew. So therefore, we understood at a very deep level the needs, the emotions and the rational needs of the customer. There was a really interesting outcome from this, right? So when we go into ideation stage, and the staff, they are the experts, right? Let's say we're talking about the business class and first class crew. They started ideating also different new packs for customers, and they invented a new drink which was really exciting for them. One thing that we discovered was the cabin crew, they didn't have a lot to talk about to passengers. So when it's mealtime, you know, what would you like? We developed what we call taste talkers. And the taste talkers were for the cabin crew. And it were little it's information on the food. There might have been some interesting bits where it came from, what wine it goes with. When we did a debrief with a cabin crew, they said to us, it was quite emotional, they said, this has made a big difference to us, because before we used to stay in the galley. Now we've got a reason to engage with our customers, and isn't that a good customer experience when you're engaging? So what we did was they prototyped, they designed this customer experience, and I was a dummy passenger and, you know, makeup passenger, and that's prototype stage. And then it went up into the air, and wonderful. we had observers testing this, doing measures. We asked customers. So that was the feel, frame, build, dream, build, and test in a nutshell. And it had a very good outcome.
Thanks. No, I think that's a very interesting example. Actually, I'll just like to give an example around that. So, you know, going back to the DBS Bank, you know, one of the ways that they did it was that when they said that, you know, we want our customers to live more and bank less, you know, then they said, okay, what is the core customer pain point? And one of the core customer pain point, George, that they came across with was the waiting time at the branches. Now it's a problem that most banking customers have faced, and then they started really applying the design thinking process to say, what is it that we can do to reduce the customer's wait time on branches? And they came across a very, very simple solution to that, which is really as simple as that. Before I, you know, approach a branch, as a customer, why don't I take an online, appointment, you know, through the SMS or even through an app, so I know exactly what time I have to reach, you know, and then there is no wait time for me. So the queue that typically, you know, banks had, which starts after the customer enters the branch, they started ensuring that that queue is more online queue to reduce the customer pain point. And then they piloted this with a few branches first to see whether it is working, and then they scaled the innovation up. So thank you so much, George. I think that was definitely.
Can I ask you, where did they get the ideas from that, Sumit? Where did that idea come from?
Largely, I think by being passionate about customers. I think being very clear about who your customer is, being passionate about it, and then having an experimentation mindset, you know, being challenging, you know, the status quo.
Okay, cool. Okay, so digital is changing the world, much more so in the last few months. So we talk about the role of digital and customer experience. So what role does technology play in the customer experience from your end?
Yeah, so I think you know, the issue with digital is that there is an unnecessarily lot of clutter, you know, around first of all what digital truly means. So I think let me first try to give an example and you know, reframe what digital is, and then we can talk about the applications towards customer experience. But I think, you know, let's imagine a near-term scenario. And the reason I'm calling it the near-term scenario is that because of the pandemic that we are saying, but I think even before the pandemic, we should have started in this journey already, or the healthcare providers should have started. Now they have no choice but to move in this direction. But if we imagine that, I'm a service professional working in a large hospital, and in order to reach my customers or get closer to my customers, the hospital decides to, install a video pod in key condominiums, across the city. And through this video pod, as a patient, I can just go in, virtually meet a doctor. There's a bot, which leverages augmented reality to check me, perhaps, do the blood test there and then. The result is instantaneous. And then, the doctor prescribes some medicine. There's a dispenser, and I receive the medication. Now, this particular scenario is not far away, but this scenario requires people to reimagine the customer experience. And if you really think about true digital innovations and what therefore digital really stands for, the main definition of digital is fairly simple, and that is, how can we reimagine a customer journey or a process, by leveraging technology to making it simple and better. So digital is not really about technology. Technology is really just a tool to achieve an end. But the main goal is to reimagine a customer journey on the process. And this can be an external customer. This can be an internal customer. I remember, a few months ago, we worked with a very large, company in India to help their finance organization redefine their, internal customer experience by leveraging design thinking and digital. And therefore, truly, what digital stands for is really three main words, which is reimagine, simplify, and innovate. And therefore, a digital innovator is constantly looking at ways of, first of all, reimagining how things get done. Second is to simplify and innovate around it. The process that they follow, is really the design thinking, and at the right step, leveraging the technology. Now, if we look at the application, therefore, of digital and the digital technologies around the customer experience, there are several. I think there are various dimensions of customer experience that get impacted. At the heart of it really is the big data and analytics. How much has the company or people invested in big data and analytics? And forget the investment. Is there a data-oriented mindset, which is wanting to understand not data, but customer needs? Because behind understanding data is you're asking yourself certain questions as an individual, and you search for answers really within that particular data. Now, at the heart being really the big data and analytics, the application of digital and customer experience is phenomenal. One is really around how can we provide a phygital experience to our customers, which is a mixture of physical and digital world coming together. So, for example, if I'm a retailer, right? If I'm an apparel retailer, one of the core elements that now I'll have to deal with, which is how do I provide a seamless online to digital to a face experience, or an in-store experience, which is, very well integrated. And it's not really about coming out with one app or one touch point. It's about the entire customer journey. What is the journey that the customer will go through, and how do I delight the customer at the every stage with a deeper seamless integration? The other application of this is on personalized, which is how do I really, really personalize the recommendations that I have for the customer. And the objective of personalizing is not really only to sell, but it's to uplift the experience, to provide better choices. So if I'm a cable operator or if I'm a DTH provider, how can I truly use data, mine that to understand what this customer's preferences are and help them, to move up to the next level. The other application obviously is clearly in the area of self-service. There is a certain category of customers, not all of them, but there's a certain and a growing category of customers, specifically millennials and Generation Y, who would prefer to be self-serviced. They do not necessarily need or want human interaction. So how do we leverage self-service better? And self-service in truly is not just about a chatbot or giving customer manuals. Previously organizations used to look at giving customer manuals around, if you have these issues, here is what you can do. Now it's much beyond that. It's not just around a chatbot, but how can organizations leverage the power of augmented reality, virtual reality over a period of time to really transform the way the self-service experience can be, or the way the complaint resolution gets done. And I think obviously the other dimension is really around solution selling. which is how can we understand the customer needs and lift up the experience. So the application of digital on customer experience is huge and tremendous. And there are all of these digital technologies can play a role, whether it's automation, artificial intelligence, big data, cloud, NLP, AR, VR. There are different companies who are doing different experiments. But the core thing here to remember, George, is that this is not just about focusing on the technology. It's really about solving what is the customer's problem and how do I leverage the technology to solve the customer's most complex challenges. So I think that this is a really exciting field. A lot of innovation is happening in this space. And the main thing that I've realized over here is that an innovator, a customer experience innovator, is not looking for best practices, because best practice way of thinking is a little bit of a copy and paste model where one organization has done this and how do I create it. But really the main challenge here for digital customer experience innovators is to think about the next practice, which is how do I create something which is solving my customers' unique challenges and do pilots and experimentation towards making it happen. The challenge though, George, is that this requires a deep understanding of customers, right? This requires not operating with shallow feedback, but having deep customer insights. So can you give some suggestions on how does one go about in doing that?
Yeah, okay, a few examples. One of my favorite videos, it's a bit old now, it's on YouTube, it's called the IDEO, I-D-E-O, Shopping Cart Challenge. IDEO is one of the world's leading innovation consultancies. And they were given a challenge to redesign a shopping cart within a week. So how do they go about doing that? So first of all, a key element for them is talk to the experts. They needed to get deep insights. So what did they do? They spoke to experts, including people who maintain the shopping carts, or we call them shopping trolleys over here. They talked to the security people. They talked to the employees. They spoke with shoppers. They took photos of shoppers. They spent a lot of time understanding the world of shopping carts. And so then they went back, and then one of the elements of design thinking and getting deep insights is you get it from different points of view. So they combine the thoughts and ideas of many different people. And as you'll see, when they went through the design thinking process, but by getting a deep insights, they could feel in their initial design. When they felt it, they could design. And then they went on to the test phase, which is the next one. Thank you, Sumit. And so they tested it, and they went back to the experts to get their views on what do you think of this prototype. And so therefore it was not the old way is, oh, let's brainstorm, but they did it in a very different way. But at Monjo in the United Kingdom, it started off with freshly made sandwiches. It's fresh food, but they're all over London and in the UK. Pret a Manger gets regular customer feedback, but it does it at a very regular level. And so what happens is it goes in, it has mystery shoppers. And the mystery shoppers, there are mystery shoppers every week. And what will happen is they're trying to have an impact, not only to get feedback, but what they do is if the employee meets these certain criteria, out comes £50. So they use their research in two ways. One is to keep track of the customer experience. What we find is that efforts to obtain information on the customer experience are more like they're a bit of a touch and go process. Oh, they'll do, the budget says that we can afford to do mystery shopping once a year. and maybe if they're lucky, they'll do focus groups. But when it comes to service, and that's really that's very shallow. It's more of a compliance point of view. But if they want to if they really want to understand the customer's point of view, if you just go to the next slide, it is about understanding the customer at a deep level. Now, when we talk about the customer, there's no such thing as one customer. It would be an interesting debate if someone said to me, the customer doesn't exist. And I would say that. The customer doesn't exist because there are many different types of customer. There are many different personas. And so therefore, if we look at, this is adapted from the Design Thinking Playbook. This is I love this book. The graphics on this book are really beautiful. It's such an easy book to read. And so what we do is we develop a deep understanding of our customers. So give them, what is this person's name? Mr. Sumit, right? Age, young, etc., well-educated, etc. And then let's say this person is a banking customer. So why does this person interact with us? What is his goals? So how do they assess quality? Well, Mr. Sumit is really busy. He assesses it based on speed, and quality of advice. Then it goes, what is good service from? What's a good experience from his point of view? What's a poor experience from his point of view? So when we go into the level of developing customer personas, you go much deeper into understanding the world of your customers. We've done this with a number of organisations. There's a building company in Australia, and in Australia, it's a very big country, and you have people working in mining towns with a lot of money. So there's one investor group. They're no nonsense. They have a certain objective. There are a certain group that they look at the Vogue magazines. So we gave them a name, and it is they define service in a certain way. Then we've got the older customers. Right, and so they had maybe a bit of a for this market, bit of a budget. They define service in a different way. So understand your customers in depth. Speak to the experts, and then the last one is it's about get micro feedback. Have we got another slide on this one? Yeah. So therefore, ethnographers, the last one is take micro feedback often. What's micro feedback? It is take many opportunities at different touch points to get the views of customers. And the first one might be a Net Promoter Score, but later on, do you mind if we contact you? Help us understand why you gave us this rating, a good rating or a poor. So you've got to surround yourself with qualitative and quantitative data to get deep insights into the customer.
Got it. Thanks, George. I think here is a challenge question for you, which is coming from one of the participants, Jagjeet Singh. So one of the questions that he's written is, with everything remotely managed, how do we apply design thinking to the sales function and value creation for the customers remotely? And he's from the capital goods industry. So any suggestions for him?
Well, I think that I would be starting off with who is your customer, right? I mean, it always goes back to that's my compass north. Who is your customer? Do we understand our customer? So what are they trying to achieve? So the short answer is it might be remote, but they're real human beings. They have real needs. It is how do we go about understanding those needs? The same compass north all the time. Start with your customer, start with your customer, start with your customer. Engage with your customer, work out how to do it. Yep, that's the compass north.
Absolutely. So I think even, I think and this question comes up quite a lot. which is how do we really do design thinking or research of the customer in the post-pandemic world, where we may not necessarily be able to observe the customers real time in action. I think there is still a lot of work that can be done in that area. One is that, to start with, I think several companies still don't have their canvases ready, right, to say who is really the customer. So I think getting that ready. Second is to have a deeper framework of research. One of the framework is to think about both internal and external data points, but also within the industry and outside the industry data points to look at how does the customer behave. And through the right level of research, it can still be managed. Another question that had come up, which George, I'll take up is, Leah had asked a question, which is on the DBS example, how were the ideas sourced for things like online queue? I think there were several reasons or factors to it, Leah, but one of the main factors is really the brand promise of DBS. And I'm going back to the brand promise because we've realized that when a company decides that this is my service brand and it's able to communicate it aspirationally to its employees, they automatically look for opportunities where the brand is not getting practiced. So if DBS's brand promises is to live more, bank less, effectively it means that we have to find out where is it that customers are spending extra time with us and try to reduce that time to make banking enjoyable. And it was through that particular process of keeping the brand in mind, then observing the customers, that they were able to queue. So I think they would have, done various things. It was around, the brand cascade, the customer FGDs, the ethnography that George has spoken about, but also just the culture of being passionate about customers and wanting to truly know, what is standing in the way. Let me ask a question now to the group or to the participants, around 100 of us who are attending this webinar, which is how much is design thinking getting leveraged in your organization? So we're going to do a quick poll here. Let me explain the poll and then we'll pull it out. The question is, how much is your company leveraging design thinking? And you have 4 options. Option number 1 is that it's a core innovation philosophy. Option number 2 is we have initiated some experiments on leveraging design thinking. Option 3 is we have trained a few people. And option number 4 is we haven't leveraged design thinking at all. So if I can request my colleague Vikrant to upload the poll, and then we'll give like a minute for us to complete it. Let's see what results come out. You should be able to see the poll now. So again, I think the question here is how much is your company leveraging design thinking currently? And it's around a 4-point scale. Number 1, it's a core innovation philosophy. Number 2 is some experiments have been initiated. Number 3 is people have been trained. And number 4 is we haven't leveraged it yet. I'll request Vikrant to project the results. Thank you, Vikrant. So I think it's not surprising results, team. I'm sure the results are you can see it's visible, but I think around 11% of us said that it's a core innovation philosophy, which is actually fairly good. 30% of us have said that there's some experiments have been initiated. 25% have said we've trained a few people. 33% have said that we haven't leveraged design thinking yet. And I think I can understand that. I think it's a philosophy which is still relatively new. Though books have been published and people have been trained. And the problem with this philosophy, like several other philosophies, that it gets reduced to training programs or a bunch of toolkits, but the cultural dimension around this philosophy can sometimes get missing. Thank you, Vikrant. We can close the the poll now.
Sumit,
So, George,
can I add something? What happens is we have staff, organisations that train staff in design thinking. But what happens is the leaders and the managers don't go through that same training. So therefore we have the staff using a certain language and the leaders don't necessarily understand that. And one of the cores, C-O-R-E-S, core of foundations of design thinking is curiosity and an openness to ideas. And it's interesting, I run workshops and with managers, and one of the ahas for them is the power of the question. And I ask them, so where do you get your ideas from? And many of them, they have a natural default of an employee asks a question and they sort of push back. I listen, I'm paid to think, we've already tried that. And there are some ideas killers within organizations. And so therefore it is about not only conducting the training, but it's got to be an organizational imperative. Curiosity, willing to make mistakes. This needs to be built into the organizational DNA. Now, we're not saying mess ups, but it's willingness to experiment. But if the organization is only sending people on training and not involving senior leadership and not developing a culture of curiosity, it is unlikely that they'll be successful in this space.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think the beauty of it is that customer is that one stakeholder which can join up the entire organization. I think several organizations suffer from the issue of cross-functional collaboration. So I think leveraging the customer to collaborate internally is where some of these things come in, and also to think innovatively around it. I'll just give another example before we move on, which is about a chemical company. I'll not name the company, but this particular company has a very interesting brand promise, which is how do we make a customer experience easy, enjoyable, and effective. And it's such a promising brand promise, right? When I'm an employee working within this company, it becomes really a benchmark for me to say, what is it that I can do to give our customers an experience easy, enjoyable, and effective. Now, when we think about any kind of chemical organization or several manufacturing organizations who are servicing other businesses, one of the big pain points of customers is when will the material reach the site, because the customer's production sometimes depends upon the raw material that these types of businesses provide. So imagine if you're in a group of employees within these organizations, and the brand promise stands for easy, enjoyable, effective. And then there is a customer pain point typically about not knowing where my shipment is, or not knowing when will things come on time. There is so much of innovation possibility, so much that one can do by applying design thinking to interview the customer and understand what really is your pain point and what would you like to know, and if you had to reimagine this process for you, what would it look like. And the heart of that is not the training people. They need to be equipped with the right set of tools, but the heart of that is this culture which one has to create to be able to towards making it happen. So George, that was another example that was coming in my mind around the subject that you were talking about.
Thank you. Good one. Thank you, Sumit. Okay, Sumit, I've got my teleprompter here. So what are the characteristics of companies with a deep customer focus?
Yeah, so I think before we go into the answer to this question, it's important to talk a little bit about why are we even talking about this particular question, because this was supposed to be a session around design thinking. I think what we've discussed it already as a team, that design thinking is not really a set of tools and templates, but it's more of a philosophy. And at the heart of the philosophy is the culture, which is saying, how do we service our customers better, right? Now, this culture, of deep customer focus resides in certain building blocks, which is beyond tools and templates. And what truly are those building blocks? What we found out is that there are 8 characteristics, which are really, really critical in helping organizations shape a customer-centric culture. Number 1, very clearly, is having a shared customer experience promise. I've been talking about this already, but having a very clearly customer brand defined to say this is what our service experience or our customer experience will stand for. I think having clarity around that and cascading around that is hugely crucial towards creating the true culture. Obviously, the other one is really the role modeling that happens from the leadership or the top management of the organization. But more importantly, having a process as an organization around having an ongoing focus on customer needs. Why in several organizations design thinking fails is because these are done as projects in a one-off. But in organizations like DBS and several others, there's an ongoing focus on customer needs because the customer needs are constantly changing, constantly evolving. So there is a mechanism to ensure that ongoing mechanism to understand what the customer needs are. And one of the big area of unutilized potential is customer complaints. Organizations are so worried about trying to reduce customer complaints that sometimes they don't necessarily realize the value that customer complaints provide, which is in terms of actual customer pain points and real customer data. And it's not about fixing that one complaint, but fixing the system, at a more holistic level. Beyond this, obviously, having a strong internal customer orientation is another key building block because, I remember that when I had started my, consulting career, I was lucky enough to work with InspireOne before I moved on and I came back. And during that time, one of the core messages that, I'd learned as a young consultant was that external service quality can never exceed the internal quality of service. And therefore, the external brand that one has to deliver depends a lot around the internal brand. And therefore, really, this design thinking philosophy, it's not really for customer experience staff only or the sales staff only. It's really for all the other support functions to think about their internal customer, redesign their processes accordingly. But equally critical is the willingness to change and innovate. Because as a company, we may have a great promise and we may have a role model management and we may know what the customer requirements are and we may feel that yes, we should treat our internal customers properly. But if there is no willingness to change and innovate, that's the big building block. So in fact, this currently we are finding is the biggest building block in established organizations, which is challenging the status quo. The mind is so set in the current ways of doing things that it stops people to even imagine, right? To even imagine what can be done. Obviously, the other element is really the organizational element where there are three key parameters around do people feel empowered to take actions around customer? What is the level of employee engagement and having that we culture so that teams, cross-functional teams can truly come together to delight the customer. So these are, the 8, key characteristics that we've identified. And I think each organization has their own struggle. Each organization has their own starting point. But I think it's good to assess the organization around these 8 dimensions and then start the journey around shaping the right kind of customer-centric culture. George, just like...
Yeah, just an interesting point. The world is moving so fast. You mentioned challenge the status quo. I think in the world today, the status quo is challenging us. It's really challenging.
Absolutely.
Us.
Exactly. The question is whether we would like to be challenged or not, right?
Well, standing still, it's not an option, is it? The world has changed around us dramatically. Right.
Exactly. So I think let's do another quick poll over here, and I know we are almost at the close of the hour. We like to keep a few minutes to see any questions from the group as well. But a quick here, the question is, which out of these 8 characteristics do you think your company can improve on? So if you could, share your answer, to this particular question, perhaps, via chat, that will be helpful. So Vikrant, if you could help me, read through some of the comments that may come in.
Definitely.
So any comments, from the group around which out of these 8 characteristics you think, your company can improve on? So we've got, a few responses. Someone has written, I'll obviously not give names here, but someone has said it's having an internal service culture. Someone has said it's having an ongoing, focus on customer needs. Absolutely, and I think having this, these two are very critical. Some people have also written, number 5, which is willingness to change and innovate, which is not surprising. Someone has also written inspirational leadership, not surprising at all. We've got a few responses saying shared customer experience promise, again, willingness to change. And then I think, creating a V culture. So not surprising at all, team. I think we'll move on. So, before we go into the closure of the webinar, I think it's, 5 minutes left. We'll be happy to see if there are any questions that the group has, either from George or me. So, in case there are any questions, if you could please type it on the question or the chat window, and we'll be happy to answer them.
Sumit, I'll ask you, like personalization, how important is that in your market? Because in our market, and I was just reading an article on a major retailer on how they've really used technology to increase level of personalization, and that is fed into sales as well. So in your market, how important is personalization, and is technology, meeting the challenge of helping to achieve that?
Yes, so absolutely. I think personalization is one of those elements, George, where I just feel that we don't have a choice. Organizations don't have a choice whether to personalize or not. Now, whether these are B2C companies which will service, a large volume of customers in a market as wide and as diverse as, let's say, the market here. But also, I think, even if there's a B2B provider which is serving, 200 to 300 customers at least, personalizing the services for each of those customers is becoming very, very critical. And I think technology can play a lot of role there. But again, I think it requires big data and analytics, because without big data and analytics, specifically if you're a B2C company, your hands are tied. One example of an organization which has done some great experimentation in personalizing by leveraging big data is Gap, which is really the apparel brand that we are all aware of. But when the group gets a little time, if you do a little bit of search around what has Gap really done, it's truly exciting, the experiment that Gap has been on. There are a couple of questions, George. One from Anurag. So he's written, with a lot of back and forth and experimentation, how does work on the ROI calculation for senior management approval? Would you like to answer that?
What was the question again?
With a lot of back and forth and experimentation, how does one work on the ROI calculation for senior management approval?
Okay, so that's a really interesting question. What we find in an agile world, at times the CFO is the blocker, right? Because the CFO says, show me the money. And we work in a digital space. And in the digital space, at times there's no proof of ROI. So I recognize this can be a major blocker. I don't have an answer. It could be a blocker. So what we've done some major research, and fundamentally the new paradigm for decision making, as was for DBS, is we've made a strategic decision to go there. We're going, and we know that we're going to make some errors, but we're going to move forward with vision. No easy answer to this one. No, literally no simple answer. But this is a C-suite issue that needs to be addressed. The decision-making criteria in an agile world need to be modified.
Yes, I think if I can answer some bit from my perspective. So one of the core things that we found out working with some of the companies is to, first of all, define it as an experiment and very clearly lay down what are the objectives of the experiment, and having a piloted approach of comparing the data with a sample group as well as a random group. So one of the things that we've realized is that when anyone at a mid management or even a senior management is trying to do an experiment, the top management, if their philosophy is different, will always stop the experimentation by looking at what the ROI is. It's a real challenge. And one of the best ways of trying to solve that is to put together the right level of information, saying that this is the experiment, calling it the experiment, saying this is what our objectives are, this is what we would like to learn. Here is how we will do the testing process of random versus control group, and making that happen. So I think doing some work around actually putting together some material around this can be helpful. A lot of it obviously depends upon the way the organization philosophy is.
So can I just answer? And it's also about
sure.
human-centered response to questions. It's about understanding what's important to the C-suite. It's about, okay, minimize risk, minimize cost, but maximize possibility. Then the business case for the experiment needs to be put into that language.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think another point that has come up is, from Shiva saying that the tips that we've given is really around customer experience. Technology is obviously playing a much bigger role, for example, through these calls and videos. Absolutely. I think, the central core is that we can't ignore it. We have to be innovators ourselves. But the way I look at technology acumen, and I'm digressing for a minute over here, it's like financial acumen. As a leader, I don't need to know how to calculate the net present value, but I need to know what it stands for and the role it will play in decision making, right? I mean, I don't need to know how to calculate an internal rate of return in financial acumen, but I know what IRR is and the role it takes. Similarly, as a leader, I must know what is blockchain, and where I can apply it, I don't have to be an expert on it. So taking ourselves into that level of curiosity to understand the basics and then being able to apply is really the core. Expertise, we'll have partners, vendors to do it for us. But as business leaders, I think that's really the core focus. George, I think we are already at the top of the hour. And I know that you have another session. So any parting thoughts from you to the group?
Yeah, I think the last point that I make is to be comfortable with design thinking, you've got to be comfortable with ambiguity, right? Some people, they need certainty. I thrive on ambiguity. Ambiguity is what my team knows. We'll work it out. We'll work it out. We'll work it out. And so therefore, if you are comfortable not knowing exactly what every step will be and accepting that things will change along the way, but you're not knowing what it will be, then you've got the right, the right makeup and the right, and it's about being in an organization that accepts that ambiguity.
Absolutely. Great. George, thank you so much for your time today, team. Thank you also to taking time for this webinar. If you'd like to connect with George or me, we'll be happy to obviously work with you. You can see George's contact details over here. Here are also the details of me. But feel free to reach out to the TAC TMI or the Inspire1 team. We'll be happy to work alongside with you. George, again, thank you so much. Wonderful. Okay, take care. Bye bye.
Thank you, Vikrant.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.